Okay, here we are back again on the Rich Van Tassel channel, giving you the Eastern Conference breakdown for the NBA season, the 2015-2016 NBA season. I'm not going to give you the exact win totals as we did in the NFL. That's easy enough in the NFL. The NBA, it's a little difficult figuring out all those numbers to make sure they mix, but I'll give you an approximate where I think they're going to be as far as the wins in the season. So the top team in the East, we're going with the Cleveland Cavaliers. I expect them to be in the 57 to 60 win range in that regard. Could they drop off a little bit? Yes, they were blistering at the end of last year. That's what people fail to realize, that they played very well after a 2019 start. I think with Kevin Love all together now and Kyrie Irving and LeBron James, they're going to get off to a much hotter start. I look for LeBron James to be in the Defensive Player of the Year discussion as well as the MVP yet again. Kyrie Irving back from that injury, he's going to continue to impress, continue to play well, and I think Kevin Love is going to be comfortable in his role. Signing Tristan Thompson was very beneficial to this team. Tristan Thompson's numbers are not great, but he really is an offensive threat just by his offensive rebounding, because you're actually having to game plan and rotate your defense just for his rebounding. So even before a shot's going up, you're rotating to Tristan Thompson. So that's really a very valuable weapon to have in that regard. So that's why we like Cleveland to be the top team in the league. Obviously, their defense is going to play very well. I like the addition of Mo Williams to give him a little pop off the bench. Iman Shumpert's another good defender. And Timothy Mozgov at center is such a big, physical guy inside. Can also shoot the free throws. So I think now that all the players have come together and all the pieces have come together, I'm expecting Cleveland to have a good start. And, it could even be more than 60 wins. If this team is clicking, there's no reason this team can't be a 65 win team. But again, especially nowadays NBA, I don't see teams necessarily going for it as hard um, as they would in the past. They like to rest guys, take their foot off the gas a little bit. So we have the Cavaliers in there in the 57 to 60 win range. The second team, I'm going with about 55 wins in that regard, would be the Washington Wizards. I'm a big John Wall fan. I love their backcourt of Wall and Bradley Beal. They're explosive. They've got to stay healthy. I'm curious to see how the loss of Paul Pierce is going to hurt this team. Pierce didn't, put up great numbers, but we saw in the playoffs the shots he was making and the leadership factor. Now, I know that the leadership has worn off on some of these guys, so they're going to have it, but maybe not having his voice there for the entire season. We'll see how that affects them. Alan Anderson, a nice pickup, a guy I've been in Brooklyn for the past couple years. Actually a quality scorer off the bench. Let's see. He'll give you about 8 points off the bench, can shoot pretty well, so that's a nice addition in that regard. The front court of Nene and Marcin Gortat makes them formidable as well. Again, Otto Porter is probably going to be the one who steps into Paul Pierce's shoes, and we'll see how that works for them this year. And they really got to take that next step. They got to start winning road playoff games, especially in the later rounds. But this is a team that twice has been to the second round of the Eastern Conference playoffs the past 2 years, so they're really going to be looking to take the next step. And it's just time, the next evolution of these guys. So look for John Wall to be an MVP consideration. They have to stay healthy. Bradley Beal was hurt last year, but that's where I see this team going. I think it's time for them to really look to take the next step, and I think they will do so. So we have the Washington Wizards as the second best team. The third team, a team that was a bit surprising last year, I expect them to come back to earth a little bit, is the Atlanta Hawks. They had a 60-win season last year. This is a team that really gets it done as a collective unit. No real stars, no guy really stands out though. Jeff Teague is a guy I really like, but you look at Mike Budenholzer, obviously the head coach coming over from San Antonio. He's really helped this team, and that's what you'd expect from a San Antonio guy, is more of a team first philosophy. All parts of the engine, so to speak. Everyone's a cog in the same machine. That's what they do. Paul Millsap gives you the post-up game you need. Kyle Korver can shoot, stretch defenses from the outside. Al Horford is the veteran. He can still knock down shots in the pick and pop. Obviously, Jeff Teague, an explosive point guard. as well as Tavo Cephalosha was hurt last year. That really hurt. That really affected them in the playoffs. He's a good defensive guard. So you have that there. I don't think they'll be as good as they were last year. I think they caught some teams by surprise, but I'm looking for them to be, 53-ish, 53 wins in that area. Who knows though? They keep going again. You'll never know. They might be a 60-win team if it continues to flick, but I expect them to come back to earth just a little bit. So there we go with number 3 in the Eastern Conference. That would be the Atlanta Hawks. Number 4 is the surprising team here. I'm probably going out on a limb with this one. I like the Milwaukee Bucks in this situation. I like the additions they've made of Greg Monroe in the offseason. Jason Kidd, you really got to give this guy credit as a head coach. However, it ended in Brooklyn. Okay, I mean Brooklyn's probably regretting letting him go. However, he got the job done, led this team that was terrible the year before to the playoffs and a 500 record. Giannis Antetokounmpo is gonna have to improve. He's still a bit raw. He's showing the improvements with this guy, but again, he's got to start shooting the ball better. He's a really freakish athlete. He can rebound. He can finish in transition, but you'd like to see him become a more polished shooter. I think that's the next evolution of his game. Michael Carter Williams, they got for basically nothing. This is a former rookie of the year last year. You have him at point guard. Jabari Parker will be healthy this year. So we'll see if the last year's highly regarded rookie can start living up to promise. I expect he will once he gets on the floor, so that's going to help them. OJ Mayo can score off the bench, and Greg Monroe has really solidified that team. Again, we discussed Greg Monroe. This guy averaged over 10 rebounds per game, 16 points, right at about 50% shooting. He's going to give them a go-to option in the post, and I think it's really going to help this team. I'm going out on the limb there with Milwaukee. I'm liking right around 50 wins there, but that's where I'm having the Bucks. I think this is going to be a good year for them, and Jason Kidd's going to get them really playing well. So look out. Oh, Jared Bayless as well. I forgot about him. Another guy who can score off the bench. They're relatively deep. They have some talent, so I'm looking out for the Milwaukee Bucks, and we'll see if I look like a fool at the end of the year. But I don't think I will. Uh, Pay attention to them. Number 5, the Chicago Bulls. I think they're going to take a step back now that they don't have Tom Thibodeau as their coach anymore. Fred Hoiberg, highly regarded college coach. Again, though, this Chicago one time got another guy who ended up going back to Iowa State afterwards. This time they're taking a guy from Iowa State. And that was Tim Floyd back in the day, and it never worked out. So Tom Thibodeau, I know he can rub management the wrong way. He's a very proud, stubborn guy, but I would have kept him as coach, and I think that's why Chicago is going to take a step back. Paul Gasol is going to have to continue to play well and consistent. Derrick Rose is going to have to stay healthy. Is Jimmy Butler the most improved player from last year? Is he going to continue his rise? They do have Aaron Brooks off the bench as a guy who can score. That's very helpful. Taj Gibson has always also been one of the better bench players in this league. A guy who can knock down shots and pick and pop, a big guy. Not the best, he rebounds. He does compete on the defensive end, can block shots, but he's not the best at it, but he does compete at it. And Joe Cano, is he going to get back to form? Doug McDermott, the last year's rookie, is he going to start to get more minutes? A lot of questions. So I'm liking Chicago as well, right in about that 49 to 50 win range, right around where Milwaukee's going to be. I think, obviously, like we said before, without Tom Thibodeau, they're going to come back just a bit, and we'll see how that goes for them. We'll see if Derrick Rose can come back, but I wouldn't hold my breath for that. Number 6, I have the Toronto Raptors at right around 46 wins. Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan are going to have to really continue to play well and carry the load for this team. They're not quite as good of a backcourt as John Wall and Bradley Beal. That's why I have them at 6 and not at 2. And they also don't have the best of front court as well. They did lose Amir Johnson to the Celtics. I don't think Amir Johnson's that good of a player. I don't think he's going to be missed. Valanciunas, gotta pronounce his name here. Hold on. Not the easiest name to pronounce. Jonas Valanciunas. He's gonna have to continue to step up. Terrence Ross at the forward position is gonna have to play well as well. But Valanciunas at center, a guy who both Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan have demanded more of. Is he gonna finally deliver, or is he gonna stay where he's been? That remains to be seen. Without Amir Johnson, you would expect his numbers to increase a bit just because he's picking up the slack. But we'll see how that goes the rest of the way for Valanciunas. Patrick Patterson is also a solid player, kind of fills the role of Amir Johnson, just a guy who rebounds and competes, but nothing really spectacular. So that's Toronto, the sixth place team, right around 46 wins. The seventh place team, I like again because they were the seventh place team in the East last year. The Boston Celtics, about 43, 44 wins, possibly a little more depending on how this goes. Now the Celtics, a lot was lost. They finished the year 24-12 last year. They really came on strong, especially after acquiring Isaiah Thomas. Marcus Smart is gonna have to start improving. He's gonna have to score more, and he's gonna have to become a better shooter. Evan Turner is a guy who I think really has found a home in Boston. He's he doesn't shoot the ball too well. He doesn't put up the flashiest assist numbers. He's not afraid of taking the big shots though. He's a guy who commands the offense, runs it very well, and at 6'7" he can play point guard, but he can still defend, and that allows Boston to go with their 3 guard lineups, which they like, with Avery Bradley as a very good defender, Marcus Smart, and then come off the bench with Isaiah Thomas who can score. Tyler Zeller had a bit of an underrated year last year. Um, could he be a starting center on a championship contending team? Probably not. He'd be more of a backup, but he can certainly be a starting center on a team like the Celtics that's in the middle of the pack there. Averaged 10 points last year, almost 6 rebounds. So not great, but again, he another guy who I think has found a bit of a home. He's certainly serviceable at center. They're going to need Kelly Olynyk to continue to improve. I'd like to see him play a bit more inside. He likes to shoot threes. Amir Johnson, again, a lot of people in Boston love Amir Johnson. I don't. This guy couldn't even average 10 points. I think that Danny Ainge really reached for him, but we'll see if he can solidify that power forward position a bit. But a lot of, it's going to come down to a lot of Marcus Smart. How well does he progress in the next year? Frankly, and James Young as well. 2 guys who were rookies last year. Are they going to finally live up to the potential? Marcus Smart played most of the year. James Young couldn't find the court, spend some time in the D League. So you have that there. That's the Celtics, about 43, 44 wins, maybe even a little more. Look for them in Toronto to really be competing at the top of that Atlantic Division. The 8th place team, who will be the last playoff team, I like the Indiana Pacers. I'm thinking them right around 500, 42, 43 wins, so a little above 500. A lot's going to come down to how well Paul George responds from his injury. He'd only played a few games last year. They're going to need him. Roy Hibbert's going to have a bounce back year. He was really missing in action a lot of last year. They're going to need him to start playing like the center they expected when this team was right on the rise and on the cusp there. Frank Vogel they didn't get rid of. He's still going to remain the coach. A lot of injuries last year, so that obviously affected it. Monte Ellis now coming over, going to give them some pop offensively. Ellis, a guy, he's really hit or miss. So, this guy's put up a ton of points on those bad Golden State teams. He's, put up a lot of points, but he's never really been to the playoffs much. So that'll be interesting to see how that dynamic works. George Hill is a quality point guard as well. So we're gonna have to see how they work that. Do they go to more of a 2 point guard lineup? We'll see what happens with that. But I'm just not sure about Paul George and Roy Hibbert if they come back, and I think kind of the losing will have infiltrated them just a bit, and we'll have to see if they can respond. But certainly the talent's there for them to be a surprise team. All right, those are all the playoff teams. Going with the 9th place team, which again, a little above where where Indianapolis was above the 500 mark. I'm liking this team to be a little below the 500 mark. That's the Charlotte Hornets. They do have Al Jefferson and Kemba Walker, so we're going to say about 39, 40 wins in that regard, possibly right at 500. Again, the Eastern Conference has generally been a bit weak, so even the lower teams in the playoffs will probably be right around that 500 mark. So, and then it usually drops off. I like the addition of Spencer Hawes. He's a guy who can shoot from the outside, always been a quality player. Al Jefferson, how well is he going to be? He had that injury a few years ago in the playoffs, which affected him. I'd like to see him get closer to 20 and 10. That could possibly make this team a playoff caliber team. Kemba Walker, we discussed when we were breaking down the top 50 players, which we had him in. has got to shoot the ball better. Frank Kaminsky, the rookie, what's he going to bring? I think Kaminsky was a solid college player. I'm not saying that he can't play in the pros. I think his body still needs to develop a bit, and you got to give him some time. Michael Kidd-Gilchrist has got to shoot the ball a lot better. So that's the ninth place team, the Charlotte Hornets. We have them there, right at about the 500 mark. The 10th place team, about 36, 36, and 46. To me, is the Miami Heat. Now, I'm sure people are probably thinking that the injuries affected the Heat. They should be back. I don't know. I'm not really convinced that this team is fully recovered from the LeBron James departure. They do have Chris Bosh coming back. He is a quality player. Dwayne Wade can still score, but we'll have to see now that Dwayne Wade's playing with Chris Bosh, where a lot of the time he was playing by himself last year, especially without LeBron James, if his scoring numbers are going to go down. Goran Dragic, he's going to have to be a better facilitator of the ball for a point guard. Eric Spoelstra is a good coach, and I'm sure he'll figure it out. But I just think this team is going to be right around, here for maybe this year and possibly the next before they start turning it around again. Gerald Green, a guy who can dunk, obviously, very inconsistent, journeyman style player despite his talent. What's he going to bring to Miami again this year? Amari Stoudemire, I don't think he's got much left in the tank anymore. That was an addition there. So I don't know, just not really feeling this team. A lot of people may disagree with that, but I'm not really feeling much from Miami this year. So we'll have to see where they continue to go. That's Miami right around about 36 and 46 this year. Number 10. The 11th place team, a little under 35 wins, around 34 and 48 mark. A team that I think is showing improvement. They've got to get their talent together. They got a lot of young talent that they've acquired since trading Dwight Howard, and that's the Orlando Magic. They bring in Scott Skiles, a no nonsense guy, so I really think that's where they're going to improve by about 10 wins off of last year. Channing Frye, good addition, veteran player, not much of a star, more of a bench player, especially now, but will certainly bring some professionalism to this team. Victor Oladipo quietly had a good year last year, just under 18 points and 4 assists. Nikola Vucevic, who was basically the centerpiece of that Dwight Howard trade. Guy was a very good rebounder, almost 11 rebounds per game, so he's just shy of 20 and 10. Can he continue to improve and really help this team? That'll be the difference this year. I don't think they're going to be quite good enough to make the playoffs. I think there's enough young talent there, though. Shabazz Napier, a nice addition as well. I think there's enough young talent there to improve, and especially with Scott Skiles, you'll look for them. They were 25 and 57 last year, so look for them to get above the 30-win mark and really set themselves up for next season after this, to where they can go. Excuse me, that was the 11th place team. That was the Orlando Magic. In 12th place, this is where we're really going to start to drop off. I'm looking right at 30 wins, if that, and that's the Detroit Pistons. Who knows what has happened to this team since they had that great run in the middle part of the turn of the century. Obviously, the loss of Greg Monroe is really going to hurt them. Flip Saunders, we just actually see here that he has died, so that's we certainly pay our condolences to him. I'm sorry. Yeah, that just came up. I'm sorry. So uh, he was obviously the former coach of the Pistons, so that literally flashing news alert just there. So we want to send our condolences to the Saunders family. Getting back to the Detroit Pistons. Sorry about that. That threw me off just a bit. Stan Van Gundy, always been a good coach. Can he get this team back to where it needs to be? They were 32 and 50 last year. I'm expecting to be right around that, probably even a little less. Brandon Jennings has always been a good point guard, not the best of shooter. Reggie Jackson is a nice addition. He came over last year from Oklahoma City, so they have a nice guard punch. Andre Drummond has never really lived up to it at the center spot. Ken did have 13 rebounds per game, so they were a good rebounding team last year, especially with Monroe and Drummond averaging all those rebounds. Just wonder why they can't seem to put it together. Marcus Morris is going to be a guy. Danny Granger as well. I think Danny Granger's past his prime. Just a lot of has-beens and young guys who just haven't reached it with this team. So not expecting much, and that's why we have it 12. We have the Detroit Pistons. Really not much to discuss there. It'll be, if they make any noise, it'll be because of Brandon Jennings and Reggie Jackson having a good year, and Andre Drummond really starting to impress more, especially on the offensive end. You wonder about the guy who's putting up 13 rebounds and 13 points a game. Why is this team not playing better? So a lot of question marks there with the Detroit Pistons. Number 14, the Philadelphia 76ers really had a terrible, terrible season last year. I think they start to improve, especially now that they were 18 and 64 last year. So I'm looking at them at about 26 and 56 because they obviously have to improve. Nerlens Noel being healthy, I think that's really going to help. Chibulo Okafor, the top draft pick, so they have two big centers. Probably going to be looking to trade one of them. So I don't, see this team really competing this year as far as a playoff spot, but certainly being better than they were last year. So that's, I mean, Tony Roten at guard is a serviceable player, but there's really nothing you can look at this team and say, oh, that's great. I mean, Roten averaged 17 points, but they lost 64 games. So was he just the guy who was getting the somebody points? Somebody has to get him. That's what I look at when I see Tony Roten's numbers. So we'll see if there's a trade made or anything of that regard coming into this season. But you have Nerlens Noel that's going to help them improve. They traded Michael Carter Williams for nothing. So there's really just nothing you can look at this team and say, oh wow, that jumps out at you, but they just can't be that as bad as they were last year. But you don't know, this team might try to tank again. There's really a lot of lack of professionalism with the San Francisco, excuse me, with the Philadelphia 76ers. Sorry about that. So that's the Sixers coming in at the 13th spot, right about 26 wins. Excuse me, that was the 15th spot. We're down to our last place team now, and that is the New York Knicks. Carmelo Anthony, I mean, they're not going to be the same horrific team they were last year because Carmelo Anthony, I'd expect him to play. Again, if he doesn't play this year, then they're really going to have a hard time. They were 17-65 last year. I'm looking at them about 23 and 59. Probably get avoid a 60 loss season, but in that area, 23, 24, 25 wins. They've added some professional guys. So as I called their own Aaron O'Flalo, who is a solid player at shooting guard, a guy who's a good defender, good offensive game as well. Carmelo Anthony playing, that's going to help them. He's obviously a guy who you have to account for when he's scoring the ball. So he's going to improve this team just a bit, but I don't think they're buying into the triangle. I don't think Derek Fisher has the trust of the players in this locker room, and I really just am expecting another bad year from the New York Knicks this season. So again, we'll see what happens with Carmelo Anthony playing and the additions of the professional players. Maybe they could rise up to about 35 wins if everything breaks right, but to expect even much more than that would just be kidding yourselves with the Knicks this season. So we'll have to see how things continue to go. All right, so there's your Eastern Conference breakdown. Tomorrow we will give you the Western Conference as we discussed, as well as the postseason awards and predictions. And be sure to stay tuned for that, as well as we're going to give you an NFL breakdown of yesterday's games from Week 7 in the NFL and the Monday Night Preview as well. We'll be doing that in just a little bit, so be sure to stay tuned for that. And thanks for watching.